And we're on the air. Hello, everyone. How's everybody today? First, I guess I have to answer a question. Not me, really. My son Hans over there on the other side, right?
Hi, guys.
And
I try to get closer to the mic.
okay, and Monkey Mind asked a very important question. He was enthused, enthralled, out of his mind completely with this banana dimension that came up yesterday. What is the banana dimension? I would kind of like to go. Is there an apple dimension or pineapple?
On the serious or on the joke side? What are we
No,
talking
I'm
about?
serious. I'm very serious. Because today we're going to talk about rationality, and you mentioned the banana dimension. I think that's a very good introduction to the subject.
For sure, it's going to be an interesting timestamp in the description, banana dimension. Someone's
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
click on that to see what the heck we're
What
talking about. Well, the banana dimension lives in your heart. You have to look within, and then you will be there. No, but yesterday I brought up the banana dimension just as a ridiculous example of a place you just can't go to. When we're talking about things.
Who says that's a ridiculous? I mean, they talk about the dimension of mass, the dimension of temperature. I mean, why not the dimension of bananas?
For sure, it's good. For sure I know that it's fake because I literally pulled it out of my butt.
Oh,
I could have called it the bajinga.
Yeah,
dimension.
but you could have hit it right on the nose also, right? I mean, for all we know. Maybe. You know, just one in a million chance, but it's a possibility. Anyways, today I'd like to introduce the subject today is irrationality. My son asked, why irrationality? Why not rationality? He says, I got kind of like a chip on my shoulder, which is more or less a comment that I use today by sheer coincidence. And yeah, the question is, what is rationality? I'm going to introduce the subject with a topic that I discussed. I think it was yesterday. I started the thread over there at the Rational Scientific group, and it goes something like this. I made a statement. The statement is in relation to the fact that they shot a bear, a polar bear in Norway. Ships carrying tourists, they must, by law, carry 2 bear guards. A bear guard is a guy with a machine gun, a bazooka, I don't know what. He carries a gun. And if a bear approaches the tourist, he's supposed to do justice.
Wait, where is this?
Norway. So it turns out that 2 of these bear guards, they come down on Svalbard Island, and they know there's some wild animals there, among them bears. And these 2 guys walk around there, and a bear pounces on one of them and hurts him in the head. And they didn't give the details. They say it wasn't life-threatening, but the bear pounced upon him, started mauling him, and the other guy shot the bear dead. Maybe he was shooting as his own friend, for all I know. I mean, but he shot the bear dead. And so animal lovers, they got a little upset that, that they had to kill this. I mean, isn't there a better way of treating animals? And I went on the other side completely. I'm on the other side of conservationism. People don't like that, but I suggest that we kill deliberately all big animals on Earth. Let me say that again. I suggest and propose, this is a political statement, by the way. It's got nothing to do with science, okay? We'll get there in a second. This is just the introduction. I'm saying that we're supposed to kill all dangerous animals on Earth, all big animals, wolves, bears, lions, tigers, hyenas. What do we need them for? And so the first issue is, when someone like sharks, eagles, I mean, we can name a whole bunch of them.
Eagles
in fact,
too?
Yeah, kill them all. I mean, what do we need them for?
So you're just suggesting kill all animals that we don't eat, basically.
Perfect. We don't need them. They're not part of our economy in any way, shape, or form. They're just there for tourism. We go to Kenya and we go on safari to watch the worst spectacle that you could possibly watch. A lion eating in front of a bunch of, they have all these jeeps there, and all the people are taking their cameras out and they're filming, and here's the lion tearing apart a poor wildebeest or a poor buffalo.
That's actually pretty gangster. I mean, when you think about it, it's brutal.
It is.
If there were a person mauling a person, you wouldn't have a crowd of people just taking pictures.
They would try to get the guy off of him, right?
Yeah,
but here they see.
So.
Here
they're like, oh man, look at that gazelle. He's getting
look all the blood that's coming out.
Like, guys, can you help me here? Nothing.
Yeah, we don't help the buffalo, and our logic, because we are rational individuals, our logic is that, well, the lion has to eat. And here we are, we're seeing this beautiful animal, this beautiful buffalo, and the lion brings him down. Sometimes it's a male lion, he does it all by himself, he doesn't even need a group of lionesses or whatever. So you bring him down, and it takes him a long time to bring this animal down, so there's a big struggle. Sometimes, I heard of one case, it took like 24 hours for a male lion to bring down a buffalo. 24 hours, the two animals were struggling. And the lion had bit the shins of the back shins of the of this buffalo, and he was and the buffalo was still quite strong after 24 hours. He was just quite tired. They were both tired, but the guy was filming, just filming and filming and filming, saying, you know, how nice, how beautiful, nature. And so I'm the irrationalist, right? Because I say that we should kill all these animals. And so people question, say, you know, Bill has lost his mind. He's cuckoo, right? Is he rational? Is he logical? Is he reasoning? I mean, how can he say such idiotic things?
Well, it's not idiotic. It's just barbaric. It's more about emotion there.
Well, I'm not. That's the point. I don't think I'm being emotional when I say it. I'm saying I think we should kill them. Because first, we're not in the Paleolithic age anymore.
Yeah, but that's the point. You're not being emotional at all.
Right, and that's I was accused of that. In fact, I was accused of that today.
It's inhuman.
Yeah, but I think it's the opposite. I think it's inhumane to let them live. Listen to what I'm going to say. I think it's inhumane to let them live. Why? Because we had 150,000 lions about 50 years ago. We only have 30,000 today. This is a species that is dying, slowly dying. What do conservationists do? They go out there and they try to save the lion, you know, save the panda, save the koala bear, whatever. Any animal that's close to extinction or is in danger of becoming extinct, go save it. No, we should kill it. What we're watching now is many animals many species becoming extinct. We're in the 6th mass extinction. We're undergoing it. Lots of species have lived their full term. They're dying in front of us. That's the way I see it, at least. And there's nothing we can do about it in great measure because they lost their genetic diversity. And their population pyramid is obviously going to overturn. We're not helping by crowding them out, by squeezing them in, corralling them, as I call it. You know, we say nature. It's not nature. Nature's what we had in the Paleolithic. That was nature, a pristine garden. What we have today is corrals. We enclose these lions, say, okay, this is where you can live. We'll allow you to live there. It's like a cattle farm, but it's just a little bigger, you know, the Serengeti. What is that? It's an enclosure. We can't go in there, they can't come out. So they're like enclosed in there. We kind of boxed them in.
It's a big zoo.
It's a big zoo, that's all it is. And we have the illusion that we are doing, you know, nature, that we're allowing nature to take its course. No, we're not. We're essentially watching these animals die like you would watch your cattle die in a farm, slowly. You know, the herd shrinking.
Wait, why is it inhumane to let them live, though?
Well, what I'm saying is the following, and I gave the example today of the Tasmanian tiger. Tasmanian tiger. Thylacine, also known as the thylacine. The last two, one died in captivity in a zoo, 1936, I think it was, 34 thereabouts, and the other one was shot in the wild by a farmer. Apparently this animal, which carries a pouch, he's a marsupial.
Wait, which one was the last one of the two?
I think it was the one in the zoo. Died later. This one was shot in the wild.
I was going to say, if he was shot, then that means bullets caused the extinction, right?
Yeah, also the other one died of old age, so they died of old age. Yeah, I guess. But the point is, you know, you kind of feel sorry for these animals because they're the last two of their breed, And it's like they can't even find a friend out there, a girl to mate with, and they could have been female for all I know. I don't remember now, but or a mate. They're the last of their species, and it kind of makes you. It's very philosophical. Makes you wonder a lot. You say, should we allow tigers or lions or whatever to reach that same status where they slowly die, we can't help them, we clone them, we do all these things, and they keep dying on us, and finally we end up with the last two, the last one, the last zero. I mean, to me, it's like watching a person die slowly, and the guy says, please kill me, and I say, well, I can't kill you because I go to prison.
Well, it isn't
Dr. Kevorkian, Dr. K.
But it isn't please kill me. Isn't just watching an old person die in a hospital bed?
Okay. The analogy is not perfect. All I'm saying is, I think it's sad to watch, a species die slowly.
Close your eyes.
That's one issue. The other one is these animals are dangerous.
Yeah.
You go into the ocean and a shark grabs. You say, oh, how nice the sharks. Except when they grab your foot, then they're not so nice. Same with an alligator or a croc,
But hold on,
you put your foot in the river and suddenly, something grabs you and pulls you in. You say, no, I don't like crocs, but it's too late.
But there's a difference between lions and sharks, because sharks kind of play a role in this huge unknown ecosystem, this food chain. We don't know what their role is, while tigers or lions, we can probably remove them without any big changes.
We know more about tigers and lions, obviously.
We know more about the effects of their absence than if you remove the
sharks. We know the sharks.
You might get some crazy things.
You'd be surprised, but we know quite a bit about the sharks as well, because we know what they eat and how they control the oceans also.
Yeah, but that's a bigger problem if we get rid of the sharks.
No, not necessarily, because if we get rid of the sharks and, I don't know, the barracudas are now multiplying, then we kill the barracudas if we have no use for them, and so on down the line. We have to kill the animals.
I don't know if we can do that. Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
I don't know how you can find every barracuda.
Well, you limit the population. You kind of shrink it until you hopefully get it down to zero. I mean, what do we need barracudas for? Do we eat barracudas? Do we put them on our...
But again, we're still talking about the ecosystem in which they live.
Yeah.
If you keep killing off all the predators, you might get some crazy things going on that we don't like.
And then you kill those as well.
Until we only have humans.
Cows and pigs and what we eat.
Live off of something else, something on the food chain.
Right, and that's the point. The point is, whoever's not part of our food chain, what do we need them for? What do we need a lion? For sure, a lion is not part of our food chain.
We don't know what's in and what's out. Some are obvious, like the lion. Okay. Some aren't so obvious, like sharks might.
Okay, let's start with the lions.
Like if you kill all the bees, we have a problem, for example.
Right. Bees. So we don't kill the bees because they pollinate. They help us.
But what about the things that eat the bees, or the things that the bees,
But that's my point. My point is, we do a study and we say, look, we have no use for alligators except for luggage.
Yeah, but we don't know.
Then let's put an alligator farm or a croc farm, and that's what we'll use the crocs for. But if we have no use, if we find that we have no use for the crocs, then kill them. Why do we need them? Why do we need this dangerous animal among us?
But there's no way of knowing that we have no use until you kill them all, and then we see. There's no like.
Oh, just in case. I mean, today, if we know that we have no use for crocs,
which we don't.
Right.
No, we don't know. Not that we don't have a use. We don't know if we have a use.
If in all this time no one has come up and says, look, I think I'm going to have a croc farm, which they do have, by the way. They have croc farms, and they do.
The issue, but I'm not talking about farming them. I'm talking about what role do they play
in the ecology. I know. I hear you.
That's a different thing than just directly needing the. We might indirectly need the.
We have studied a lot of these animals. We know a lot about the food chains.
Yeah,
okay,
anything until you remove them.
Yeah, but that's like
50 years ago we could have removed all the bees and then we'd be in trouble.
But we wouldn't even be in trouble then. We just wouldn't have certain things. We could
don't know that. Maybe all the plants that we.
Well, then let's pray that God doesn't get rid of the bees,
okay,
right?
But we know that now.
And
we don't even know that. We kind of just assume that now that if we get rid of the bees, we have these problems. But we don't really. We're not sure. Ecology is a huge, like God.
Complicated.
Level. That's some God level shit right there. Getting rid of the lions might, like, if there's only 2 lions or 1 lion, we kill that guy. There's not going to be a difference in the ecology. But if we kill all the X, and it's like a big population of its ecology, that's gonna have different. That's different than just killing the last koala, for example.
Yeah, and again, we would have to do a study, find out as much as
The only
possible.
study you can do is doing it and then seeing the consequences.
Well, that's true also, and,
Okay, but
and I'm
aside from
sure,
all that-
and I'm sure that's not going to affect. But my point here is the following: so am I rational? That's the question. Am I a rational individual if I suggest? I mean, if you want different theories, you came to the right place because I'm proposing the rope hypothesis for light and gravity and magnetism and so on, and these people are proposing particles and waves. I propose that the Neanderthals did not die because they intermarried with humans, and that's the status quo today. That's the reigning theory. I do not accept that an asteroid killed the dinos. They died in a different way, like all other mass extinctions, as a result of food. The ecological pyramid turned on them, and that's not what orthodoxy says. And and same here.
So
If you want real weird theories, you came to the right place. And does that make me an irrationalist? I mean, should we all vote? Should we all vote and say, well, Bill's an irrational individual because he's against this, against 99% of humanity, against that 99.9, and so on down the line. Should we vote for rationality?
Isn't that how rationality works?
Does it? We vote for rationality.
Yeah. It's like common
Well, maybe
sense.
that's the way it works.
They call it
The
common
question is
sense. They call it common sense.
Should it work
it's
that way?
common.
Should it work that way?
You're saying, what do you mean by should? Like, is it beneficial to consider rationality democratic? Is that the question? Is it beneficial?
Let me put a statement made by Mr. Leonard Susskind, Leo Susskind. He's from Stanford University, and he says the following, which is very pertinent. I was going to say it later, but you brought up the subject, now you're stuck with it. And he says the following. He says, modern science is difficult and often counterintuitive. Where intuition and common sense failed, they had to create new forms of intuition, mainly through the use of abstract mathematics. Well, no kidding. When common sense fails, uncommon sense must be created. Human cognition does not operate according to principles of common sense.
It's kind of truth in that.
So they created a new common sense. It used to be common sense was what common people thought, the majority. And he's saying, we had to create a new common sense based on mathematics, of course. Why? Because we couldn't explain anything. We couldn't justify things. And so we had to get into this world in which, common sense had to change.
Well, you know what Einstein said about common sense, right?
The least common of all senses, I guess.
There was another one. He said that it's just a list of prejudices that you accumulate by the age of 18.
Yeah, and so the question, should we vote for common sense? I mean, common sense by definition, you're going to use the word common sense.
We gotta go slower.
What I'm saying is rationality. Should we vote for rationality? Is rationality something we define, or is something we democratic where we all vote for it and raise our hands?
Going off of what you just showed there, he's got kind of a point where there are some things that are counterintuitive. We have that phrase counterintuitive because it happens more than once. It's happened a few. The counterintuitive phenomenon where
paradox.
Things are not paradox. It's things are the way you think they wouldn't be.
Boo. Things are the
way
way
you think they wouldn't be. Like you see it's a common trend in YouTube videos, these life hack videos.
Okay.
Where they show what do you call it? Uncommon ways of doing things. No, not uncommon, but like unorthodox
ways of
doing
things. Okay,
like opening a kiwi or something.
Okay, doing it a different way.
But more effective. That's the thing.
Well, even if it's less effective, a different way is fine.
It's always more effective. That's my point. The
Okay.
more effective way isn't the straightforward way that you just off the top of the head think.
I hear you.
And there's many things like
Magic
that.
tricks are like that also. How you do things. There are different
the way
ways
it's
of doing
actually done isn't the way you think it was done.
Right.
We have this phrase counterintuitive because it comes up so often, but that's a good kind of piece of this puzzle of common sense / rationality / logic.
Okay, but then again, is it something we vote for? That's the issue. Because if I'm crazy, if I'm irrational, if I'm illogical or unreasonable or any word you want to use to qualify me, because I hold theories, arguments, opinions different than 99% of humanity, what should we do with me? Put me in a nut house and say, well, you're crazy.
That's what we do traditionally.
Right, but the question is this rationality something we vote for and say, we hold a trial and we have a jury and say, okay, if 11 people vote against you, you're or 12 of them or whatever, you know. I mean, how should we decide, or should we define what rationality is?
Well, isn't rationality, before we define it, just the notion that everyone has, isn't rationality an opinion?
No.
I think you're rational.
No.
Joe doesn't think you're rational.
No. I say that when we say something is correct or incorrect, when we say that something is right or wrong, when we say that something is true or false, that's an opinion. That's a belief. But when we say that something is rational, it is no longer an opinion because, again, and the reason I say it's not, is that it's not going to be subjective. We define it. We don't vote for it and say, well, we think Bill is crazy. No. Yeah, if you do it that way, I mean, if the entire flat earth society votes against me, then I'm irrational. No doubt about it. But if instead we define it objectively, let's assume we could define the word rationality or irrational. I prefer to define that one. Let's assume that we can define it. Then all we have to do is follow the definition. Say, well, what does the definition say? Let's just apply the definition. Let's go by spec.
If you want to define it objectively.
Assume we could.
I'm not assuming you wanted to.
Well, let's assume.
Let's assume. Hold on, but real quick, you're talking as if the objective definition is better than the subjective one.
Yeah.
But that's your opinion.
No.
But go on with the objective.
Okay, so let me define rationality or irrationality. It doesn't matter. One is the negative, the other, right? The opposite. I'm going to define irrationality so that people understand. And let me just say it up front. Objects are unimaginable. That's an irrationality. If you're going to do physics, especially, right? If you propose an object that you cannot even imagine, that's an irrationality right there, objectively. You can say, well, I can't imagine it, but I'm going to propose it anyways. No.
Wait, are you defining or just giving examples?
No, I'm just, first I'm just going to mention the three criteria that I use for irrationality. One is proposing objects that are unimaginable. That's an irrational proposal. Second, using undefined words or not using them consistently. In other words, you define it one way and then use it differently throughout your presentation. And the third one, that your theory, your explanation doesn't follow from your assumptions. Okay, those three criteria, those are the one I'm going to mention real quick here.
You should have written those up on the board.
I'm putting it right up there. I'm just
mentioning.
mentioning.
To write along.
Open
your books.
Right. Yeah, to page 45. Here I put it up there. Okay, so I just mentioned it right now. Now I'm gonna give you some examples, etc.
No, but I meant the three criteria.
Yeah, that's what I'm putting here. Here's the first one.
Oh, I see.
I'm going one by one. Here's the first one. Treating concepts as objects. That's the main one. It's not only an imaginal object. It's that people turn love into heart. That's the problem, right? And so we say love moves mountain, or transferring energy. What do you mean you transferred energy? Energy is not an object. So you're treating this concept as an object. You can say you transferred a rock, but you can't say you transferred love or energy or mass, because those are concepts. Moving a mass, carrying a force, a 0D point particle. There's no such object as a 0D point particle. Please draw it. Show me on the blackboard what you're talking about.
Show me something that I can imagine. Basically, show me a video that I can play in my head.
Or show me a picture, because essentially what we're saying is an object is an image of something. You can present the object itself, a statue of it, a mock-up or whatever, or you can draw it and say, look, this is a rock. Okay, or whatever. And so I look and I say, okay, I know what the word rock means. It means that thing you've got there. But if I say 4D space-time, 4-dimensional, what am I going to draw? And in fact, they tell you that it's unimaginable. And so we got a problem with that because they're already starting their whole presentation with an irrationality. Okay, that's the first one. Second one, in fact, here I'll mention a couple more, which are very common. I like to put these up. One is the electromagnetic wave. There's no such physical object called a wave. And what they draw is a bunch of vectors there. Those arrows are vectors. They come out of an axis, which is an abstract straight line. That's all it is. and they put it together, and you see that and say, well, I see an object there. No, you're not you're not staring at an object. You're staring at a bunch of arrows which come out of an axis. The arrows are also vectors. They're just representations of vectors. They call one of them the electric field. What is a field? Yesterday we discussed this. It's just a value, a number. And so we end up with a total abstraction which they pictorially represent with what you see in front of you. Okay?
I like that. That's a very accurate way of
but here it gets worse only. Here's Mr. I always forget his name. Roger Penrose, okay? Roger Penrose, and he puts what is known as a wave packet. That's his illustration in his book. That's a wave packet, guys. It's an arrow that has pierced a bed spring. That's what it is. So now you know what a wave packet looks like, okay? Just make sure you don't touch that tip because it might hurt you. In other words, this is a vector, and I don't know, and supposedly piercing an electromagnetic wave that is oscillating up and down and has apparently a different amplitude as you go from beginning to end. This is absolute nonsense, but this is what they draw, and they draw it because they want to show you something. They say, well, we can't really illustrate a wave packet, but look, just for the sake of argument, this is a wave packet, and they show you this, and you say, well, what the hell am I staring at? So these are all irrational objects. We can't say that this is the mediator of light, and we cannot say that that is the mediator of light either. Neither one of these two is a mediator of light, okay? So that's the first one. The second one is, like I mentioned, inconsistent or undefined word, inconsistent definition or undefined words.
The second criteria.
That's the second criteria, the second specification, right, for irrationality. You don't define your term. And the most famous example I can think of is both for space-time and black holes. They say that both of these are objects. You'll hear that word object. Four-dimensional space-time is an object, la 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 la. Black hole is an object in space, blah 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 blah, whatever. Okay, so what is an object? Well, they never defined the word object. That's the first problem. But assuming they did define it, they usually define it as that which you can touch or see. Well, can you touch or see a black hole? I mean, they say that no light comes out of a black hole, so we can't see it. We can't touch it because it's zero volume. So we can't touch or see it, but a black hole is an object, and the definition of object is touch or see, or the criteria for it, the most popular one. And so we got a problem because, to say that a black hole is an object and then just leaving it up to the individual to think, well, I know what an object is. No, please define what an object is because it's critical to what you just stated. And the other one is, using energy as a concept. You define it as a concept, and then you use it as an object. You say, what is energy? It's a concept. What does it mean? It means the ability or the capacity to blah 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 blah, whatever. Okay, the capacity, that's a property. And then they say, I'm going to move now energy from A to B, or I'm going to transfer energy from A to B. You move the capacity, you transfer the capacity. What does that mean? And so this is where the irrationality comes in. And again, I think these criteria are objective. And the last one, number 3, is that the theory is inconsistent with or doesn't follow from the assumptions. Case I always use, the detective comes to the mansion, sees a body on the floor with a knife stuck to her back. I'll make it a woman, okay? So the prosecutor starts and presents the knife in court and says, Exhibit 1, the knife. He presents that as an exhibit because he's going to insinuate or suggest to the court, to the jury, that this knife is what killed the person. And then his theory, his case, is about the bullet that broke the victim's skull. You say, hold it, you presented a knife and your theory is about guns and bullets, so it's inconsistent with the assumptions, and that's just a patently obvious case. But you got other cases, mathematics for sure. What's a point? Well, they draw a dot, and you say, okay, I see what a point is. It's that little circle that you just drew. Okay, I know the word point means that. And then they use that as a location or as a number throughout the presentation. Another one, triangle is defined as a 2-dimensional Euclidean space. And then we have Lobachevsky and Riemann. Lobachevsky put it on his saddle and has a saddle-shaped triangle. Riemann put it on a sphere, and he had a spherical triangle, and you say, hold it, it's a plane. The word triangle means plane. It's a plane figure, and these guys are twisting it and calling it, it's like taking a cube, or better still, a square, tilting it, creating, that sensation where this thing is disappearing, it's becoming a rectangle, and continuing to call it a square, saying, well, I'm tilting the square. No, as soon as you move it a single inch sideways, you no longer have a square.
Yeah,
and these are
trying to talk about a three-dimensional triangle.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right, and this is the issue. The issue is that all these, this is where the irrationality is, and that's why, I define it. But when you look up the word irrational...
Wait, but you haven't defined it, you just gave criteria.
Yeah, I gave criteria, and again, the best definition... No, I do have a definition. I'm saying, and again, it just harps upon the main criteria. And the main criteria is as follows. Using concepts as objects. That is irrational.
Or
reification.
What about vice versa? Objects as concepts?
Same thing. Same thing. But the main one that's used is usually concepts as objects, at least in this day and age. And as I suggested, Max Born said, we became more and more abstract. And so they started using concepts more and less objects. They don't even deal with objects today in mathematical physics. Well, here's the definition you'll find in the dictionary. This is for the word irrational. Without the faculty of reason, deprived of reason, without or deprived of normal mental clarity or sound judgment, not in accordance with reason, okay? So the key word there is reason.
Have you looked up reason?
Yeah, well, hold on. Give me a chance here. And then we look at the Wikipedia. They have more or less the same thing, but they define the word rationality is the quality or state of being rational. I love that definition. Rationality is the quality or state of being rational.
So they always define.
Yeah,
like
they
that.
use these synonyms.
No, but that's just how it is in the dictionary. Then you have to look up the word rational.
Right, and that is being based on or agreeable to reason. Okay, so again, they use the word reason. Rationality implies the conformity of one's beliefs with one's reasons to believe. And one's actions with one's reasons for action. In other words, that you act according to your reasoning.
But reason is just a synonym, isn't it?
Well, let's find out. So I looked up the word reason also in the Wikipedia, and here it is. Reason is the capacity for consciously making sense of things. But the word sense is reason, which means rationality. So making sense, what do you mean making sense? Well, that means that you're reasonable.
And it sounds like we're just beating around the bush, like you're just trying to be a stick in the mud. Like, come on, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but see because then they accuse you of being a devil's advocate. But here's the issue. The issue is that then you get to the mathematicians and all these people who say, well, you can't really define any term in the dictionary because to define them you need other words, and for those you need other words. And this is where they get it. You say, well, what is rationality? Rationality is reason. Okay, what is reason? Reason is making sense. Well, what is making sense? Well, it's rationality, or who knows what, logic. And so you just keep getting to run around with all these words because they never learn how to define words scientifically. That's why I come up here and say, look, I'm going to define rationality. Whether you agree with me or not, at least you know my version of rationality or irrationality. I'm saying that irrationality specifically is using concepts as objects. That's in physics. But there are other criteria: unimaginable objects, undefined words, theory inconsistent with the assumptions. Those are other criteria. And yes, so what is the issue? The issue is that I do propose, at least, let me put myself back in here. I do propose an objective criteria.
But
for defining rationality or irrational, so that we can use it consistently. So we can say, look, Bill is irrational.
But it's interesting,
right? Or rational.
This distinction between definition and criteria. You kind of have that with the word object too, where you don't really define object. You really just give it a criteria.
But that is a definition for the word object.
But
what I'm saying, at least we can use that. More or less objective.
My point with the criteria thing is with definition, it's like, it's like definition just seems like you just pull it out of your butt. But criteria is like, okay, from now on, if it doesn't meet this criteria, we don't call it that. I like criteria. It's a very very straightforward,
binary, and
way
objective
of
also in that sense, in the sense that at least it's objective with respect to the criteria.
It's
whether you have
it's logical. That's the word. Because it's that's how it's used in programming. It's binary.
It follows from the criteria, the established criteria.
This is the criteria we give it. We all agree with this criteria. Let's just go with this. If it has this criteria, we call it that. If it doesn't have the criteria, we don't call it that.
Okay, that's a different
way
of putting it.
It's very straightforward.
That's why I have this smart son.
This three criteria for irrationality.
I like my son because he's such an intelligent creature,
But the three criteria for irrationality is that you can make that list, the criteria. It probably has more criteria.
I mentioned
more
those
subtle ones that kind of like you don't have to get to because these are the three big ones, right?
I would say that I totally agree with that. I haven't looked beyond this. I think I had another one coming in my mind sometime back, but it's like I didn't dwell too much on it because I think these three pretty much cover, I would say, 90 to 99% of the cases that we can all more or less rationalize things and say, is this guy being rational? For example, yesterday we talked about Mr. Sean Carroll. And he comes up and talks about fields and how fields mediate gravity and how fields mediate magnets. And so you say, well, what is a field? Now you ask him for a definition. So he says it's a value at each point in space, around a magnet, around the Earth, in the case of gravity. Fine, perfect. What do you mean a value? Well, yeah, there's a value, there's a potential, there's a certain strength at this point, a different strength here, a different strength there. Okay, fine. We understand the definition. We know what a field is, all these points there. How does that produce a mechanism, physical mechanism of attraction? And that's where he fails. So there's no logical consistency, no rationality when we use his own definitions to try to explain attraction or action at a distance. And of course, he says, we don't understand it very well. Of course he can't. He can never understand it if he defines one thing and uses something else later on. And again, that's inconsistency between theory and assumptions and definitions. If he's using his definitions inconsistently, he's defining it as a concept, saying a value at each point in space, and then use it as a physical object. Or he says, look, I'm going to explain how a magnet attracts another one. He says, I'm going to put a field in there. Okay, so he's throwing in an object, and then he says, oh, by the way, it's a concept, it's an abstract concept. So how does that abstract concept bring two solid objects together? So that's where the irrationality comes into. And he can't say he's a rational individual then. And I'm sure he's not going to like that a bit.
Yeah, because it sounds like saying
you're crazy.
Yeah, it's synonym for crazy. But I want to come back to this criteria thing because it's criteria. I think all definitions are simply a list of criteria that we go through.
Yeah.
Like I guess not.
No. I'll give you an example. I'll give you the best example possible. The word object,
right?
Word object again. What are the criteria? And here are the brainstorming throughout time. See, touch, criteria. I'm just talking about criteria, specification.
That's how we define it.
See, touch, mass, volume, motion, right? Those are the main ones. And I'm saying shape. So people say, oh, tell me, Bill, what is shape? We don't need to understand what shape is to the high degree. All we have to do is compare shape against motion. Is shape the same thing as motion?
Is it a better criteria?
Right, is it a better criteria? What are we going to use in physics? Are we going to use motion as the definition? Or are we going to use... So it's the criteria that we're using.
It goes back to what you talk about when you try to make a definition as short and concise as possible.
Right.
It's really what you're trying to say is let's get the least amount of criteria that cuts off everything that we don't call this word.
Or make it black and white.
But criteria, by definition, is black and white.
Correct. It's on or off, yes or no.
When you're trying to make a definition concise, as short as possible, what you're really trying to do is using the least amount of criteria, the least amount of bullets, the least amount of checks that you have to go through with every word to cancel out all the things that you don't call that word.
Prevent people from going on tangents to bringing up... devil's advocacy, extreme devil's advocacy, this kind of thing, like the guy says, if you got a long definition, like you look up the definition of what science is, or the definition of the term scientific method, you'll find, a whole paragraph. And so, the devil's advocate can pick you to pieces there. He says, well, how about this word here? And what do you mean by this? You got all this criteria, all these commas and periods and semicolons. And you say to the guy, look, science, what is science? Rational explanations. Period. Done. Now the guy, he's going to have to struggle to fight against that, and I don't create it just to create problems. I'm creating it to exclude all the noise. There's too much noise in the definitions.
Yeah, but it's interesting, this idea of criteria when it comes to definitions, because if you take the example earlier with rationality, right? They didn't really give a criteria. So it wasn't a really definition. Not. That's how it isn't a definition. When you have a circular definition, all that means is you haven't given it a criteria.
Yeah.
It's like a function in a code that's still looking for what to spit
But their
out.
excuse is that words are needed to define words, but they're always using synonyms.
Yeah, but see, that's where you use the argument of criteria to cut through all that, because you don't. It's not words. It's really just criteria. What criteria do we? Same thing when you talk about life. When you try to define the word life, you're not really what you're trying to do is look for the criteria under which we call life.
Correct.
Like, what do we call life? You show up.
Everything that falls under this.
But you try to get the least amount of criteria that still, gets everything you call life and excludes everything you don't call life.
Right.
That's really what you're trying to do. So you just get the least amount of criteria that kind of covers the word.
And gets rid of the noise.
Yeah, but the definition for rationality is very telling. Any circular definition, all it basically does is spew a bunch of useless words, because it's not giving any criteria that we can kind of check off to use the word consistently.
That's one issue. The other one is we got to show the distinction here. The one thing that opposes the other. What these people are using are synonyms. What is rationality? Reason. What is reason? Logic. What is logic? Common sense. What is common sense? Right. And the other one is what you mentioned. What do we oppose against that? We oppose, criteria. Instead of using synonyms, use criteria. And the criteria can't be the same word. It can't be a synonym. It's got to be a criteria.
Well,
criterion.
That's the thing. When you're talking about criteria, by definition,
it's a different word.
It's a different word. You can't.
Correct.
I mean, you can't say, okay, the criteria we're going to use to call things a dog is that it's a dog.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we got that.
And what's a dog? A four-legged animal.
No,
okay.
No, it's a dog. A dog is 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 a dog. So
well, it's a can.
The word love. Okay, we're going to use the word love to talk about anything that has to do with love.
Yeah.
Great. What have we learned?
Yeah.
Love is love is love is love. Can we use a different word, different criteria?
Right.
See, that's the thing. When we're talking about different words, we're really talking about what criteria. Because when we're talking about criteria, we're saying with other words, what can we compare this word to? I mean, what is a criteria? Let's start there.
Well, a criterion is again like a property of that word, like the main property, the main characteristic, the main the thing that identifies it in it. It's that key word that gives you a sense of what are you talking about. Like if I say object. Right, I like that word because
that's
it's got so many criteria.
Because hold on, real quick to object. Yeah. Object isn't a synonym of
shape. It's not.
That's a very important part.
Right, shape is the criterion for the primary and only, I'd say, criterion.
But that's interesting. It's the only criterion for, but it's not a synonym. That's so weird.
Right. Whereas, and again, mass is not a synonym of object. Volume is not a synonym of object. 3D is not a synonym for object. See, touch, motion, none of those are criterion for object. None of those are synonyms, but they're criterion, but then you choose the best criteria. Which criterion are we going to use among all these?
They're inefficient criteria.
Yeah, and they can be torn apart real easily aside from that. But the point here is that what we're proposing is criterion. Which of these criteria are we going to use to define or to say, well, we know what an object is because this is the key property, the key, the thing that gives it its main characteristic or its only characteristic.
Object is a good one because if you do use the criteria, touch, for example.
Yeah.
Object is everything are things that you can touch, and that's the only criteria.
Right.
Then you can't call a black hole an object because we can't touch it.
Yeah.
You know.
And I can't
touch Neptune.
I can't touch the star on the other side of the universe.
We can't call Neptune an object.
Right.
And that's fine if that's how you want to use the word.
No, but what they would say is, look, we saw, you see, right, how the asteroid touched Saturn. Fine. We can't see or touch a star on the other side of the universe. Period.
Yeah.
And so isn't the word star an object? Are we going to say, well these stars that we can see and touch, or see at least, those are objects. But the word star, that star that's on the other side of the universe, that's not an object. We can't do that. We can't see or touch it. So again, there's many ways of debunking some of these these definitions. All you can do is say which is the best criterion among all of these, and that's what we're doing here. That was a good point that you mentioned that these are all criteria.
I think that's where they get into these huge
debates.
Not debates.
Circular.
No. I'm talking
reasoning?
about the definition for life. When biologists, in school, they try to teach us what the definition for life is. Which each
reproduces.
They get this huge list of criteria.
And they say, well, this one doesn't reproduce. That one doesn't eat. That one doesn't breathe air. And
life is a tricky word. You're trying to because what you're trying to do when you're defining it, when you're trying to list out all the least amount of criteria for life, is you're trying to exclude rocks and robots.
Right. Somehow.
But you're trying to keep bacteria, fish.
Things that move.
Things that what we call life. But then you're trying to find what's the right amount of words, or what's the right criteria to exclude rocks and robots, unless you want to include robots.
Right.
But normally we're excluding robots, and we want to include all these weird. And bacteria have different properties and criteria than alligators and birds.
Right.
They lay eggs. They don't crap.
Anaerobic life doesn't breathe air. Air kills it, so we can't say, well, it's something that breathes. This guy doesn't breathe. Air kills it.
The weirdest one is a virus, where it has.
It's a molecule.
Yeah, a virus has almost all the right properties, but we still don't call that life.
Yeah.
So it's
it's a molecule.
What's going on here?
Yeah. So again, criteria is what we have to. So rationality or irrationality is not something we vote for. It's something we define. Once we define, we can apply it to a person and say, look, you're rational or you're irrational.
Well, what is wait? So you're saying if we define, or if we give these three main criteria to the word irrational, then
the theory
you're saying
is
that's
rational.
Sufficient to basically debunk, or what do you call it? Shut up anything we actually do call irrational.
The way I look at it is this way. We got to go in two steps here. I use the criteria, right? We got three criteria here, okay? And we say first to the physicist who's out there, the presenter, the guy who's giving the talk, we say, that theory, because of these criteria, it's rational or irrational, right? But I can give a presentation talking about special relativity or quantum mechanics or whatever. I don't accept that, but I can give the presentation, and people say, the theory you just gave is irrational. Okay? We're attacking the theory. We're qualifying the theory. We're saying the theory is irrational. Does that mean I'm irrational? No, I'm just giving the presentation. I'm explaining a theory of someone else's theory and saying this is what general relativity says.
That's a good point.
But if I believe the theory, if this is my theory, this is my proposal, I'm saying this is what I believe in, this is what I want you people to accept, and that this is the proposal for how the universe works. Now I'm irrational as an individual.
No, I actually like
that's my point.
My point, I think it's better just to say that you can't call someone irrational. You can call theories irrational.
Well,
I think calling someone irrational is kind of it's kind of like talking about the word infinity instead of incessant. It's just you're applying it to the wrong thing. you can't really talk about irrational people.
Well,
or you shouldn't. I think the word irrational and rational should be reserved for theories
objective
or
thing, not
ideas.
theory. The problem is that we introduce a lot of everyday, ordinary speech stuff, and we say, "Oh, he's a very rational guy. He's a reasoning guy." We give him kudos,
Really
we give him
logical.
attaboys.
He's a logical guy.
Yeah, he's
that
either logical or illogical, and so the problem is we say this guy is very rational, very logical, very commonsensical. We use those terms to qualify the person, and what I'm saying is, if we're going to get into that territory and use it, bring it into science, say, well, Joe, who just gave this idiotic presentation, he's a rational guy. No, he's not a rational guy because he said something stupid.
It goes to something.
And so, if the theory is irrational, and someone else qualifies that guy as rational or commonsensical or whatever, or reasoning or logical, that's where you got to step in and say, look, this guy's an irrational guy, and here's the criterion. Otherwise, we got to stick to what he said a minute ago, and that's just let's use the word rational or irrational to the theory.
Yeah, because how people want to call each other, that's
because then you get into.
I don't care about that. I mean, I like. I don't know where I heard it or read it, but it's this thing where someone tells a funny joke, the joke is funny, but if he tells 5 funny jokes, he's funny. It's kind of like what you call the person. Is just kind of what they do.
That's an opinion.
Yeah, that's why I don't really care
conclusion.
about. That's why I don't really care about what the people are called. Let's just stick to the theory. Whether
well, that's more
objective.
No doubt about it. It's more objective. What I hate is when people come in there and say, "Oh, Joe is rational or Joe is irrational." Well, if he said something stupid, you can't say that he's also rational.
You worry about politics there, boss.
Yeah. It is, but because people bring politics into it, they bring their opinions, they bring their beliefs,
and but that all stays at the door once the conference starts.
Well, not quite, because
once the conference starts, everyone's opinions are at the door.
Not quite. Ideally. Not quite, because all these guys get medals, get money, so there is a.
Yeah, but that's all politics. We're talking about.
It is. I agree with. But
at a conference. All money, all ego,
stays outside. Names. The medals, I bring my authority, my medal.
You gotta keep your medal outside.
The gold medal I won at the what is it at the
science fair?
No,
I'm trying to say,
the prize, what's the main prize in science?
Nobel.
The Nobel. He brings his Nobel medal in there and he says, "Oh, I've got authority."
There are no doctors in a scientific conference.
No.
There's only misters.
No degrees, no medals,
no
doctors, authority, no voting, no democracy, no opinions, no beliefs, right?
None of that. It's a weird zone.
It's a very limited,
very inhumane.
Just objective, fanatically objective is the way it should be. I just explained the mechanism so that people understand it. Period.
It's a very inhumane. But not inhumane like malice, but inhumane like inhuman, like
environment,
devoid of emotion, devoid of egos, devoid of titles.
Very hard to do among humans.
Yeah, very hard to do among humans. Sometimes I'm talking to you. And I think I'm being rational and logical, and you'll just come with this thing that's so rational that I just I don't even think about it. I don't notice my own mistake that I'm making until
we all have this problem. We all fall into that hole. But the issue is, maybe you're right. Maybe the word irrational should be reserved exclusively for theories, and we just treat them objectively. Look, you failed here. You failed.
Yeah.
Criterion number 1, you didn't have a valid object, or you failed criterion number 2, you didn't have a good definition, or you used your definition consistently, or the third one, your theory didn't follow from your assumptions.
Yeah, because if you're trying to call the guy irrational, or it's like calling him names or something, we're not doing science at that point.
I think it's understood, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that
there's no wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
No, but the guy takes it upon himself. Look, your theory is irrational. What does that mean? You're saying that he's irrational?
No. There's no wink, wink, nudge, nudge in science. Everything is literal. There's no if you know what I mean. The words "if you know what I mean" are forbidden.
You know what I mean?
They're forbidden.
Your theory is irrational. It's unreasonable.
Winking is forbidden in a scientific conference. Everything is literal.
That's the idea today, and
Criterion. I like criterion is a good criterion for definition.
I like that the way you put that because it's criteria, and I kept saying, and I'll have to look at it a little further, that it's the definition, but I think my son is correct here. It's criterion.
Because that's how programming
you put a criteria or a criterion, and then it's quite objective. And you don't, and that's one. And the other one is criterion is opposite to synonym, because criterion, I can't say it's an antonym, but it's a word that is not a synonym. Yeah. And what these people, as you can see here, for the word rationality, if rationality is reason and reason is common sense and common sense is logic and so on, all we're doing is essentially using different kinds of synonyms to qualify rationality. Whereas, as you say, look, rationality or irrationality using concepts as objects, then it's straight, or unimaginable objects, or you haven't defined your terms, or you're using them inconsistently. Then it's straightforward. Then you don't have to worry about my opinion. You can't say that, oh, my opinion is that you're irrational. No, you're what you just said is irrational by definition. And what is the definition of the set of criteria?
I think a lot of all scientists should really be doing programming, because programming really teaches you how logical logic really can be.
Can't be allowed. You put a criterion, you got to stay with it.
Like you put in the if then, and the computer is going to take your word for it. It's going to take you to task.
No subjectivity.
There's no wink, nudge. The computer doesn't know any of that.
That's good. I like that.
It's straightforward.
Computer's a robot.
You kind of have to.
No feelings.
You have to do science as if you were doing it with not an alien. Do you like talking about aliens?
No. I like the computer. That's good. It's a machine.
Computer, he won't. He's not going to.
You can't cheat it. You can't cheat it.
He's not going to misunderstand.
Right.
He's going to understand exactly what you tell him. If you call this, if this is a duck. Good. Then this is a duck is a duck is a duck. There's no if you say a duck has a beak, has wings, and is white, then
it's not the White House.
Anything that's red is not going to see as a duck. Anything that doesn't have wings it's not going to see as a duck.
Right.
If something has these three,
you got to stick to those criteria.
Then it's going to call that a duck. It's just very straightforward.
Love it. Yeah, and that's what. Yeah, maybe computers should do all this deciding whether a theory is rational or not. We just punch it in, say. Rationality, concepts as objects, can't use them, okay? So you program the computer that way. Now the other guy says, well, I'm going to be transferring energy. And the computer goes, can't do that.
Can't transfer.
And say, oh, how come? Well, because, you violated the criteria.
Yeah.
I like that. Very good.
Is there a difference between logical and rational?
There is a different. Logical means that it follows from the premises. Whereas irrational, again, it's poorly defined, but I'm defining it here. I'm saying, there are criteria. If you use it's illogical to use concepts as objects, right? It's irrational. It's illogical.
I think
it doesn't follow. The logic doesn't follow.
No, I think that's the difference, because with logic, it's just this follows from that, follows from that.
Yeah.
While with rational, you gave it two more criteria. You just added more criteria to call it rational. It
One follows from the other is logical, whereas the other one is just criteria. If you don't match the criteria, then it's on or off. It's black or white. Rejected.
I think all you did is you added two more criteria to call it rational. Because logical is still...
I got to think a little more deeply about that.
Because the word logical has the third criteria that you use, and that's it.
That it doesn't follow from the assumption.
It doesn't follow from the assumption. While the word rational, the way you defined it, has two more criteria. So something
is that what you're saying?
Something could still be logical, but not be rational, for example.
In other words, I see what you're saying. Okay, you're right. Because I got a smart kid here. If the theory follows from the assumptions... then it's logical, right? Because that's the notion we have of logic, that it follows from the premises, from the axioms or whatever.
You still don't have a
but if you have the wrong objects or you don't have proper definitions, you could be irrational while still being logical. That's good.
In fact, you can do that in programming. You could have no picture on the screen.
Okay.
And it's still doing processes in the console. So it's logical, but it's not rational because there's nothing to be seen. There's no object there.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll see you again tomorrow, and now you know whether you can go to the mirror and talk to them, find out whether you're rational or irrational. You have a criteria by which to judge not yourself, but your theories. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same station. Bye-bye.